I first came across Ruth Ware when I read her book In a Dark, Dark Wood as a proof. Knew nothing about her and absolutely loved it. I'm delighted to welcome Ruth, also a fellow West Sussex author, to the Author's Studio.
I would say the one thing to have in mind is where you want to end up. I always think that writing a book is a little bit like going on a journey. You know where you start, you know where you want to go. How you get there is the joy of the journey and where you're going to, what you're going to see along the way. But if you don't know where you're going, then ultimately you can lose your way and find out that you're sort of heading up a dead end or something. So have a vague idea of the ending would be my top tip. Well, I've only written 2 crime thrillers, so choosing which one is my favourite is really hard. It's a bit like being asked to pick between my kids. I guess as a writer you always hope that you're getting better. So maybe I'm going to say that the favourite book is the one that I'm writing right now, which isn't out yet. Probably going to be called The Lying Game, but don't quote me on that if my publishers make me change it. I write in my office, which is also our spare room, so I get kicked out whenever we have guests, which is obviously a double joy. But I have small kids and they're still of an age where they need a certain amount of chivying round. So I take them to school and then I come home, write madly for about 4 hours until it's time to pick them up again. And I set my alarm because I have had times when I've been so engrossed in a scene that I've looked up and found that I'm already 10 minutes late to pick them up. I was a huge classic crime geek as a teenager and I read Agatha Christie, Josephine Tey, Dorothy L. Sayers, all of the greats. I didn't really deliberately channel it when I was writing my first book, In a Dark, Dark Wood, but as soon as I handed it to my agent, literally the first thing she said to me was, "It's very Agatha Christie-ish." And when the reviews came out, people started to say the same thing. It's kind of a locked room mystery. So it definitely does. It has those kind of Christie-ish tropes. Even the title is taken from a nursery rhyme, which, she does brilliantly in so many of her books. And when I was editing, I put in a little reference to And Then There Were None, I guess as a kind of thank you to her and a way of acknowledging her influence. So although it wasn't deliberate, I think she was there in my subconscious all along, and probably she was the greatest influence on that book, certainly. I don't believe that any pleasures are guilty. If they're not harming someone else, then you go for it. Similarly, I don't believe in guilty reading. If you love a book, reading a book has, as far as I'm concerned, never done anyone any harm. So if you like it, go for it. I don't have any rituals, mainly because I don't have much time at the moment. I have been producing a book a year, and to do that, you need to knuckle down and actually just write the words. So yeah, I guess if anything is my ritual, it would be dropping the kids off at school and then firing up my computer. So it's very prosaic. I feel I ought to have a more interesting answer, but I don't. I did always want to be an author. I can remember having a conversation with my mum when I was about 6 years old, and we were having that, what would you like to be when you grow up kind of discussion. And I thought for a little bit and I said, I think I'd really like to write books. And my mum said, which is very good advice and still holds true, well, it's really competitive. I think it might be a job that lots of people want to do. It might be quite hard to make a living. So maybe you should have a plan B. And so I thought for a bit longer and I said, well, do you think it's a job writing the paragraph that goes on the backs of books, which, the blurb, which I didn't know the word at the time. And my mum said, well, yeah, I guess that is probably a job. And that's basically what I ended up doing. I had a lot of kind of part-time jobs and rattled around a bit, but eventually I ended up working as a publicist in a publisher. And I didn't write the blurbs on the back of the books, but a big part of my job was talking about books, trying to sum them up in a pithy way, convincing people to read them. So yeah, I got the best of both worlds. I ended up doing my B job and my A job. First of all, when I start writing a book, I have to have a question. or a scene that's demanding that it needs to be written, or a what if. And everything kind of expands outwards from there. I found with two of my books that my editors wanted a synopsis before they would cough up the money. So for those I did a kind of skeleton outline, just to basically convince them that there was a book-shaped project there, and I guess to convince me a little bit as well. One of my books was very different. It's the book that's just out at the moment, actually, The Woman in Cabin 10, and that came from an initial scene which was a woman waking up in the middle of the night having heard a sound. She thinks it's a scream, but she's not sure, and she runs to the balcony. She's on a ship, and she sees what she thinks is a body being pushed overboard, but when she goes to investigate, there's no one in the room, and the security guard who comes to help her search tells her that there never has been. There's no passenger in that cabin. So that for that book, that scene, finding out the why, the how that occurred, that was the jumping off point, and I kind of winged it from there, more or less. I can honestly say that there isn't really any question I hate being asked. There's questions that all writers get asked a lot, like, what's the secret of writing a great novel, or where do you get your ideas? And that's one of those questions that has 1,001 answers, and yet at the same time none, because there isn't any one secret. If there was, we'd all be writing best-selling novels and rolling about in our millions of pounds. So that's always a tough one, because I want to be able to give people the secret, but I don't know what it is as much as you guys don't. But I still love talking about it, so it's not a question that I hate being asked. I love talking about books. I've never lost any work on a big scale, no. I've had those moments where I've accidentally slightly overwritten a file, or I've forgotten to save, and then the cat's walked over the keyboard and deleted stuff. But no, I've never lost anything on a big scale, except I guess for the fact that I've always written. I wrote all my life from when I was able to write, basically. And so I have a lot of manuscripts that went straight under the bed because I didn't do anything with them. And some of those are lost just because I wrote them on really outmoded computers. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to retrieve that data now. So there's probably about 5 or 6 books that are just gone. But there's probably a good reason for that. And I think the literary world hasn't lost very much.
As you've seen, Ruth is a very bright lady. It's no wonder her books are now well up the New York Times bestseller list. Loads more to come on the Author Studio. Stay tuned.